what makes fantasy special is that it creates just the right amount of distance between what you're actually experiencing and what's happening to you, and also like what are the other maybe beliefs or fears or things that you think are important. Once you have that distance, once it's not your world and it's another world, and it can be a similar world, but it's not your world, it creates that space that allows you to really process those emotions and really think about those belief systems. So academics, they love to create hypotheticals for testing our intuitions. Like, I know a lot of people have heard this one. What if one person is tied to one track, right? And there's like 5 people tied to another track. I'm gonna pause right here. I absolutely have no idea what she is showing you guys because I didn't look beforehand. So this is probably the most unnerving part of this. But I'm gonna trust and we're gonna keep going. It's probably fine over there. Okay, all right, so, and so it's this idea of if you had a choice, if you could choose which track the train is gonna go to, is there one that's better? Is it one person or 5 people? Do you have the right to make that distinction? So the academic hypotheticals, they are useful because they narrow things down to one issue or like a very discrete set of issues that you're trying to test and decide. And that's helpful, but also it's really helpful to build an entire world. Because when you have this entire fantasy world, you have more space to play with. You have more things that you can test out. So it has its own value for helping us decide, like, you know, why are we feeling the way that we're feeling? What do we really care about? What really matters? What do we think is a good guy? What is a bad guy? It helps us figure those things out. And, all right, so we'll get to my evidence, right? I'm making a claim, I have evidence now, and I'm going to go off my experience. So I found that a lot of times when I was in undergrad and something would happen, I would end up kind of caught in this cycle, like this loop of thoughts where I would just keep arguing over and over, and I would not be able to stop in this like destructive pattern, right? So it never gets anywhere. You're just saying to yourself over and over again all the reasons that like you're right and they're a jerk, but then the feelings don't actually go away. And I think that that's because until we actually think about like what are all the fears and beliefs that go into that feeling, into that isolated event, it's hard for our brains to process and move past it, right? So I started this exercise where I would actually come up with an entire fantasy world, and I would make up characters, and I would try to decide, okay, so what is it about this situation, right? My friend hurt my feelings Saturday night. I think she's a real jerk. Why do I keep thinking about it? I want to be studying on the way to my midterm. I don't want to be arguing with my friend in my head, but I am. Why is that? Just by trying to decide what is it important about the actual real situation that needs transferred into the fake situation helps you figure out what's at stake. So you're just you going through the mental exercise of, okay, but what do I really think was important or at stake in the real situation? I'm going to put those into my world. And this isn't something where you're going to try to make money from it or it has to be coherent. It's just an exercise to give you distance between your pain and your fears and what else might be at play. All right. So, I would like to talk about how this plays into games. Right, so everybody here, you guys are here because you love games and tabletop games. And I know we have some D&D fans in here, I heard that earlier. So opening this up to a broader fantasy context than just literary. It's okay. All right, let's talk about how fantasy and games can help us. And all of this information I'm about to tell you is from an article, and it's called Tabletop Role-Playing Games as Therapeutic Interventions with Adults to Increase Social Connectedness. It's by Matthew S. Abbott, Kimberly Stouse, and Alan F. Burnett. It was published June 21st, 2021. Okay? An estimated 15 million Americans suffer from social anxiety, and more than 80% of those people will not seek treatment. Over a third of adults over the age of 45 report feeling lonely, and it matters for our health. Social connections result in a lower mortality rate. So, two social workers decided to design a research experiment. And they had 7 adults over 1 year, and they played D&D with them in a therapeutic way. Now, it's not new to have this idea of play in therapy. So around 1934, we started having this idea of play in therapy as psychodrama. And then in 1980, there was research done specifically on D&D, where they had 8 to 9-year-old boys from a neighborhood, and they had them play D&D, and they watched the results. And they said that they found that it validated group cohesion, rehearsal of group problem-solving skills, and enhanced individual self-esteem through support from group members. And in fact, members who play these kinds of games report that they have higher levels of empathy. So despite this promising study back in 1980, little research was done until 2019. So back to those 2 social workers with the 7 adults for 1 year. They found from their study that there was increased ability to confront mistakes and to risk making them in social situations, increased confidence, increased ability to handle confrontation, and participants reported the ability to transfer these social skills to real-world situations. So this type of therapeutic approach, and maybe some of you have already heard, is called geek therapy. This is a real thing, and you can find groups. Okay, so if you're struggling with social anxiety and or loneliness, and you like tabletop games, this may be something that you want to look into. Just another way that fantasy helps us, and I did go over, so now it's Christina.
All right, thank you. So I have been asked to talk about why I feature animals in my writing, and I have a really simple answer to that. I love animals. From the jumping spiders that live on the picnic table where I eat my lunch, to my elderly dog, her name is Bernice. She greets me at the front door whenever I come in. Animals are my companions in both life and art. So any interaction that I have with an animal elevates my day, even if it's just catching a glimpse of deer flitting through the woods on a snowy afternoon. So animals, in terms of fiction, and in terms of actual life too, animals make any story better. Disney knows this, Pixar knows this, any child who has fallen in love with Louie the dog knows this. Animals make great companions, and they don't have any of the baggage that human companions have. So this makes it even a better relationship sometimes. Loneliness, which is something Emily talked about, but we all have this in common. And I don't care if there's 1,000 people around you. At some point, we face the world alone. The stay-at-home mother who sends her youngest child to college, the old man who must leave his house behind and enter a nursing home, which just happened to my father this week. The kid sitting on the bench during the baseball game. Every person you encounter carries moments of solitude. Now give that mother an orange cake. Put the elderly man in charge of feeding the chickens. And yes, my paralyzed father is now in charge of feeding chickens. Buy the lonely kid a ball python, and suddenly stories unfold. The animal bridges isolation with connection. The animal initiates the journey. Animals are often heroes, issuing that call to adventure. When you head off into the neighborhood after a stray dog, if you're like me, you do that all the time, you're embarking on an adventure. The dog is a dark shadow flickering in and out of civilized space, just like a ghost. It's both wizard and dragon. Even with a box of milk bones, it takes skill and valor to catch a stray. But would Alice have fallen down the rabbit hole if she had not followed that white rabbit? So go ahead and, but very carefully, because you don't want to be too rash, but follow that dog, follow that adventure. The true gift of the crow is not that rusty bottle cap. It's the moment you are chosen. You become the ring bearer. You are marked for greatness. Usually we can't follow the call to adventure because we have bills to pay and pans to iron. But for that flicker of time, something wild singled you out. It is hinting at a were singled out by a house cat at a party, the same cat who supposedly never comes out for strangers. Being singled out a cat, by the way, is much better than being singled by a person, right? Especially if it's a crazy uncle. And I have nothing against crazy uncles. I've got many of them. But there's something magical about being chosen by someone else who's a aloof house cat. Even when writers use animals to terrify, no animal is truly evil. Dangerous, yes. Evil, no. The big bad wolf is a manifestation of the deep dark wood. The wild places where humans are never meant to enter. The stories are more about human fare than actual wolves, fulfilling the expectations of the primordial storyteller who learned to fear the lands beyond the cultivated fields. Storytellers often explore fear through the most powerful of the animals. Such stories teach us respect for the wild. They teach us to stay away in many cases. Thanks to Peter Benchley, we have Jaws. If you've never read the book or watched the movies, you probably know this fairy tale already. Shark eats swimmer off the coast of Amityville. Jaws is a mindless eating machine that doesn't recognize the sacred nature of human life. The ocean is mysterious, the modern version of the deep dark woods. Jaws enacts contemporary fears of the unknown, just as the big bad wolf embodied medieval fears. Both characters are terrifying because they flip the natural order. You are the captain of your boat until a giant fish comes and eats you alive. It's disturbing because we're the ones who are supposed to be doing all the eating. We're at the top of the food chain. But I've got bad news. We are only reasonably capable when compared to other animals. The average human could probably outmatch the average possum, but set us up against a raccoon and we are toast. It is only our culture that makes us the most dangerous animal on earth. Stories give us a less than gentle reminder of our vulnerability, just to keep us safe when we strap on that red hood and head into the forest. While I personally love a good monster tale, animal or otherwise, what is most interesting about animals for me is their individuality. When I write, I like to give animal characters the same way I give to humans. I like the idea of animals as people because this is how I find myself relating to my own pets. And because it's fun. And because it opens up narrative potential. And because people who love animals don't like it when authors treat animals as objects. When we spend time with an animal, we understand that while they exemplify a particular breed and species, they have distinct personalities. As the great naturalist Jane Goodall once said, you cannot share your life with a dog and not know perfectly well that animals have personalities, they have minds, and they have feelings. Anyone who has a pet can attest to this. I've been blessed with several throughout my lifetime, and no two are similar. I doubt I could have picked Garth, who is my chunky old tabby cat, out of a police lineup, based on his stripes alone. But I could have identified him by his favorite toy mouse, and his strong preference for buttered popcorn and Munster cheese. He also had a story before he just randomly showed up at my apartment one day. I only wish I knew what that story was. We make up stories to comfort our children. We can also invent stories to comfort ourselves. That is what storytelling is all about. This leads me to more academic reasons why I write about animals. I'm conscientiously working within a tradition that has been around since our prehistoric ancestors sat around the campfire telling stories in the night. We hear the resonance of such forgotten tales through the West African Anansi the spider, the indigenous American coyote, and the Chinese monkey, to name a few of my own personal favorites. In these traditions, humanity doesn't stand apart from nature, but is part of life's continuum. Animal tricksters outwit the powerful through intelligence, illusion, and cunning. They're sacred transgressors, outsmarting the strong, challenging injustice, trampling the borders between the wild and the civilized. At times, they even challenge the gods, defeating the status quo through sheer cunning. They are the agents of chaos, but they are also funny and entertaining, because laughter had its place in sacred thought in those traditional times. Trickster persist. We experience trickster energy every time we laugh at a TikTok video of a cat tapping a glass off the table, or a dog guiltily nested in the fluff of a room couch. Being able to share these moments makes some of the more difficult aspects of pet ownership easier, because so many of us have chosen to invite Trickster into our lives. We can relate to shattered faces. And once again, we feel less lonely and more connected. And connection is something we desperately you're all creators, because gaming, what is gaming but creative and collaborative storytelling and experiencing story? I invite you to follow those animals through these doors. I mean, if you have a pet yourself, your pet has a story. And if you don't know what that story is, make one up. You know the sense. You have the intuitive feel for your own animal and for your pets. So see what happens. There are stories everywhere. Go out and tell them. Thank you.
So I'm going to be weird and just say a few things. I don't have much to contribute because just that I love my brilliant friends and I think that they are the best. But building up a little bit of what was already said, fantasy helps us explore. We can explore our own psyche and relationships to the world and other people, explore other realms, both similar and dissimilar to our own, go to places where the possibilities are endless, but the results can mirror our own complicated but small world. But to me, the real power of fantasy is broadening the game. Our game, which is the game of life, of course. So to me, life is intended for enjoyment, for fun. There really aren't any consequences, and you can fight me on this, but it's just another level to explore. So there are consequences. Obviously there are consequences, but say you commit a crime, level up. You now get to explore jail. So awesome. I mean, it helps if you believe in reincarnation too, I guess. There are no saves. That's another big drawback. The devs really dropped the ball on that one, in my opinion. But okay, body damage is also bad. So let's just stick to the metaphor. It's very flawed, but we're just going to stick with that. The beauty of fantasy is we get to experience things that we never could in our own lifetimes. I personally want to do it all in my brief time on this planet. I want to play all the games that life provides. I can't. I have to work. I'm on a really shitty level right now, but that's okay. I'm going to work my way through it, and we all work our way through it, coming with strategies and ways to get through to the next level, the one that we want it to be. We escape through fantasies both big and small. We read, we play, we grow. Each experience, each story shapes us, making our lives a little different, maybe worse, maybe better, but the only constant is that we have to keep playing. And obviously, I'm coming from a place of great privilege, but my goal is to make life fun for myself, and if I can help make the game a little easier for other people, that is what I do. At the end of the game, I think the main goals are to say that we played a good game, we experienced all that we could, and at least we had fun playing. Fantasy has a big hand in that, giving us outlets, escapes, maps for us to navigate and cope with life. It's a cheat code. Use it. You have our permission.
Alrighty, so that is it, but you guys please feel free to come up and grab stickers. We have plenty. And then I believe there is a gaming hall, you guys, right, Mike? Mike's our Origins expert. He says, yes, there is a gaming hall. If y'all want to go play games afterwards, I think that would be a fun use of our time, yeah? Yeah, definitely.
Yes, sure, definitely.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess we will let you ask questions if you have them. Okay, but not for me. I don't want to answer questions.
We did get a little long. If y'all.
Yeah, if you want to leave, you can. If you have questions for Christina, you can ask her.
Or Emily.
You can ask me too, though it would be weird and unfriendly, but probably.
Don't ask me. I have no answer.
Does anyone have any questions? That's perfect. No, I'm sorry. Well, email us your questions. Oh, hey, you know what? We have a website, theworldswithin.net, and if you go there, you can find our email address, and our email is worldswithinfantasy@gmail.com. So seriously,
We are
if you
taking
have
submissions. We are taking submissions.
and we're taking submissions. 1,000 to 10,000 words, fantasy and science fiction, you can submit to us. And yeah, and if you have any questions or any comments or anything, you just want to reach out and talk about how much you love fantasy or science fiction, that's